Hi, I'm Tim, welcome to our channel, and thanks for logging on. Today, we're discussing a rare bird. This is the Omega Speedmaster Professional Moon Phase. Yes, I said Speedmaster Professional Moon Phase. Technically a Speedy Pro and one of the fascinating watches made by Omega in the last 30 years. You can see this combination Speedmaster Professional Moon Watch, Moon Phase calendar, stainless steel, white gold chronograph on our website. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you enjoy these videos, and please click on the card in the upper right hand corner of the screen at any time during this video to see our full sales listing for this fascinating hybrid, with additional accessories included in the sale, high resolution images for your desktop, and naturally complete pricing details for this rare and semi-exotic Omega Speedmaster. This is a watch that came out in 1999, and though production probably ceased around 2003, it was cataloged into the mid-2000s. An unusual combination of white gold bezel, that is, a white gold bezel with no aluminum insert as you'd see on a traditional moon watch. It features a full stainless steel case construction. What is quite familiar is that the watch has the Speedmaster Professional dial signature, as well as the same case design, size, and proportions. For the record, you're looking at reference 3575.20.00. This one you're going to want to watch. On my wrist, you do know the size of the watch, as its profile is familiar. Keep in mind, this is not precisely the moon watch case, as you can already see two through fittings for the adjustment to the moon phase in the calendar, but it is the spit-in image of its more famous and less complicated brethren. 42 millimeters across the round of the case, not including the crown or the chronograph pushers. Because of the presence of a sapphire crystal, it's not quite as thick as a traditional Speedy Moon. You'll note 14.2 millimeters thick, but it does have a dramatically domed box section sapphire to recreate the Moonwatch aesthetic, albeit without the scratch-prone Hesselite crystal construction. From lug to lug, the watch is quite wearable, as it measures 48.5 millimeters, but when you include the solid end links of the bracelet, and the watch was available on both bracelet and strap, this is the one you want to own, but those solid end links extend the watch to a robust 52.8 millimeters across the wrist, so it does have a contemporary and broad wrist stance, and yet on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, I have no trouble wearing it, and you'll note from the profile shot overhead that it's not really pushing the limits to the edge of my wrist. There's no overhang. I believe you could wear this watch on a wrist down to as small as 14 centimeters in circumference with security and good proportion. Now, the lug spacing of the watch is 20 millimeters, so though this was the variant that came on a bracelet, the more deluxe of the two offered, nevertheless, you can accessorize to your heart's content with Omega OEM and aftermarket straps. For the Moonwatch, almost like Panerai Luminor and Radiomir, there is a world of aftermarket strap support. Now let's get a little bit closer, change the focus, and get this dial in sharp definition. Okay. The bracelet is a handsome and versatile piece. 3-link in design, but not quite as brutal as something like the 3-link Rolex Oyster. It's a combination of polished highlights and a satin dominant base. You'll also note polished highlights on the flank. For the most part, satin to reduce glare. It wears its high polish like jewelry, an accent, not the dominant. You'll also note that the clasp is substantial, but quite familiar. Essentially, if you're familiar with a contemporary Moonwatch or even a Seamaster 300, exactly like that. Twin trigger deployant, milled out, very solid, just doesn't have the dive extension that you would get in a Seamaster, though there are 3 intermediate fine adjustment points that you can select with a conventional pin tool for sizing. And you'll note that these sizable links are removed with pins and sleeves. This is early 2000s Omega technology right here. But the dial itself embodies technology reaching back far, far longer than the early 2000s, as the base of the watch is actually the Omega 1861 found in the Moonwatch, converted with a calendar and a moon phase to become the caliber 1866. Now you'll note it has a Moonwatch-like inscription on the back, and of course the hippocampus seahorse to remind us that the Speedmaster was originally part of the water-resistant Seamaster family, but it might seem a little dissonant to see mention of a watch flight qualified for NASA and worn on the moon, in tandem with what is clearly a romantic and impractical complication. This is not the Moonwatch, but as it bears the professional signature on the dial side and a caliber that is intimately related to the Moonwatch caliber, This is almost a watch that is what George Costanza of Seinfeld would call the worlds colliding. This is the world of Omega as the horology connoisseur's watch and Omega as the sports watch and history connoisseur's watch. Both threads live in this timepiece. Nowhere is that more evident than the ironic contrast between the steel case, satin and polished, and the 18-karat white gold tachymeter bezel. Now, conventionally, even on precious metal Speedmasters, the tachymeter has featured an aluminum insert. Here, it's bare white gold with a lacquer fill, an unconventional look that visually extends the dial, as the white coloration, silvery on the dial, silvery on the tack, silvery on the case, leads the watch to read as far larger than it is, since the dial effectively flows into the tone of the bezel, which flows into the tone of the case and the bracelet. Now, what you'll note, we're going to get close again, is that the dial is not quite silver. There's something else going on here. It's what would conventionally be described as opaline by the industry, so a matte finish that actually has a slight pebbly granular texture, almost like an eggshell. This one is exceptional because it also has a little bit of the off-white coloration of an eggshell. Though in some lights it appears silvery, its true color in white light is more of an ivory, and it makes for a dramatic contrast with the blued indices and the blued hands at center, as well as the sub-registers and the gorgeous blue crescent moon phase at 12 o'clock. Now let's navigate this dial. You'll note broad arrow, hour hand, Dauphine style, and fully loomed minute hand, sub-registers with alpha style hands. You also note a lancet counterweighted seconds hand, and because this is a chronograph and it is wound, we may as well fire up the mechanism for a little bit of action. There is a radial date superimposed over the moon phase at 12 o'clock, and then there's a small pip of luminescent material, superluminova, outboard of each one of the hand-applied hour indices. This is a richly detailed Omega dial, as you'll note, flanking the 12-hour register at 6 o'clock, the notion of Speedmaster and professional. Once again, there's that element of irony. But the dial is also beautifully balanced. It has a cruciform symmetry that is extremely becoming, attractive to the eye, and improves its viability as dress accessory, dress attire, formal timepiece. You'll also note that the timepiece features the traditional asymmetrical case. Cover the dial and you could mistake it for a moon watch unless you look at its 9 o'clock flank, but you have the same recess around the periphery of the crown as well as the pushers to protect them. This was part of the transition from Speedmaster to professional in 1965 as NASA adopted the type. Other technical information, well, manually wound, 48-hour power reserve, 17 joules, 21,600 vibration per hour beat rate, and although it adds the calendar and the moon phase, it remains fundamentally a cam-operated and lateral clutch tank-tough chronograph mechanism. One important technical change to note, however, is the transition from 50 meters water resistant to 30 by virtue of the through fittings for the calendar and the moon phase pusher adjusters. An unusual and rare watch. As these come up on 20 years old, fewer and fewer good examples survive. Many have seen their white gold bezels sanded down to stubs. The original lacquer fill of the indices and the text, as well as the numerals, has begun to fade, and unfortunately many have been serially refinished. This one remains unspoiled. This is as handsome as it would have been had you walked into an Omega retailer in 1999 and purchased this curious Y2K era hybrid of high horology and utility horology. Omega Speedmaster Professional Moon Phase. High horology and the utility watch. See the worlds collide by the light of day on our website.